When a 16-year-old girl walked onto one of the biggest film sets in Hollywood, nobody expected her to become the most talked about person in the room. But that is exactly what happened. Her name was Dela. She came from a tiny town in West Virginia where nobody was famous and nothing was guaranteed. She had never been on a set this size. She had never stood this close to this much money, this many cameras, this many people who had spent their whole careers working with the greatest names in the history of cinema. And on the very first morning, before a single frame had been filmed, before the director had even called action for the first time, she did something that made the entire crew stop breathing. Clint Eastwood walked onto the set. Now understand what that means. This is not just a famous person walking into a room. This is 93 years of American film history moving toward you on two legs. This is the man who made generations of people sit forward in their seats and forget that they were sitting in a theater at all. When Clint Eastwood walks into a room, people stand straighter, they get quieter. They feel something shift in the air around them, the way the air shifts before a storm. He walked past the director. He walked past the camera operators and the lighting crew and the assistant directors who scrambled to say good morning. He walked with his eyes fixed on one person. This 16-year-old girl standing near the craft table, holding a paper cup of hot chocolate in both hands, reading her script like it might disappear if she looked away. He stopped in front of her. He extended his hand. The whole crew watched. Juana and this girl, this teenager from a town nobody had heard of, on her first day on a major Hollywood set, looked at his hand, looked at his face, took one step backward, and slowly shook her head. She refused to shake Clint Eastwood's hand. The crew froze. The director looked like someone had knocked the air out of him. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. 25 experienced film professionals stood completely still and waited to see what would happen next, because nothing in their combined years of experience had prepared them for this moment. And then Clint Eastwood did something that nobody in that room expected. He smiled. Not his famous squint. Not the look from the movies that people have been imitating at parties for 50 years. Something else. Something that nobody on that crew had ever seen on his face before. Something that looked, if you can believe it, like recognition. Like he had just seen something he already understood. What happened in the hours and days and weeks that followed that moment changed every single person who was on that set. It changed what they believed about courage, about kindness, about what it means to truly see another person. And when the full story finally came out, when the thing that nobody knew was finally revealed, it stopped people cold. Because here is the truth. The crew thought they had watched a young actress disrespect a legend. They thought they had seen arrogance. They thought they had seen a girl who did not understand what she was throwing away. They had seen none of those things. What they had actually seen was a 16-year-old girl making the bravest, most loving choice she knew how to make. A girl carrying something so heavy and so private that she had not told a single person on that set. A girl who had come to that job not for fame, not for reviews, not for any of the things that people usually come to Hollywood for. She had come for her little brother and what Clint Eastwood knew, what he had known before he ever set foot on that set, before he ever extended that hand, before any of it, is the part that will genuinely stop your heart when you hear it. Because he did not walk onto that set by accident. He did not take that role for the reasons his own people believed he took it. And everything that looked like coincidence, the hand sanitizer, the story about his daughter, Orion's belt, the package on the last day of filming, none of it was coincidence at all. Every single piece of it had been planned before day one, before the hand was ever extended, before she ever had the chance to refuse it. Stay with this video all the way to the end, because the full truth of what Clint Eastwood knew and when he knew it, and what he quietly did about it before anyone was watching, that is the part that will change the way you see this entire story from the very beginning. Hollow Creek, West Virginia, is not the kind of place people make movies about. There are no mountains that look like postcards. The river that runs through town is narrow and brown and smells like iron when it rains. The main street has a hardware store, a pharmacy, a diner called Patty's that has served the same 5 things since 1974, and a laundromat that stays open until 10 o'clock at night. It stays open that late because some families can only afford to do their laundry after dark. Shocking when the machines are cheaper, when nobody is watching. The people of Hollow Creek are not famous. They are not remarkable in the way that people on television are remarkable. They work hard. They get tired. They love their kids and worry about their bills and sit on their porches on summer evenings and watch the fireflies come out. They are the kind of people the rest of the world forgets about until it needs them, and then forgets again right after. Dela Voss was born in a small white house on the east side of Hollow Creek on a Tuesday in February during a snowstorm that knocked out the power for 3 straight days. Her mother, Renata Voss, always said that was a sign. A sign of what? She could never quite explain. But she said it every birthday, standing in the kitchen with a dish towel in her hand, smiling at Dela like she was the most interesting mystery she had ever encountered. A sign, every single year. Renata worked 2 jobs. During the day, she was a teacher's aide at Hollow Creek Elementary, the same school Dela and her little brother Tomas would both attend. She helped kids learn to read. She sharpened pencils and wiped tables and sat beside children who were struggling and stayed with them, quietly, patiently, until they got it. She was good at staying. At night, 3 times a week, she answered phones at an insurance company 2 towns over. She drove 40 minutes there and 40 minutes back. She never complained about the drive. She complained about plenty of other things. A faucet that dripped no matter how tight you turned it. The price of chicken. The neighbor's dog who barked from midnight until 2 every Thursday, for reasons known only to the dog. But never the drive. The drive was just the drive. It was the thing between her and keeping the lights on. You don't complain about the thing between you and keeping the lights on. Dela's father, Marcus Voss, had left when Dela was 4 years old. She had exactly 3 memories of him. She had counted them. She kept them the way you keep things that can't be replaced. Carefully in a specific place inside herself. Taken out rarely. The first memory. The smell of his jacket. Leather and cigarettes and something underneath that was probably just him. The way some people have a smell that belongs only to them. The second memory, the sound of his laugh. Too loud, too big for whatever room he was in. The kind of laugh that made other people laugh even when nothing was funny, just because of the sheer size of it. The third memory, the front door, the night he left, not a slam. That would have been something. A slam meant anger, meant drama, meant something to be angry back at. But Marcus Voss did not slam the door when he left. He closed it softly, carefully, like he was trying not to wake anyone up, like he was being polite about it. That soft, careful click had lived inside Dela's chest for her entire life. She could feel it sometimes on quiet nights, when the house was still, and Thomas was asleep and Renata was at work. A small cold stone, sitting just below her left collarbone. Never quite warm, never quite gone. Tomas was 9 years old, 3 years younger than Dela, and the happiest person she had ever known in her life. He had a gap between his 2 front teeth wide enough to whistle through, which he did all the time, while doing homework, while eating cereal, while walking down the street. He could whistle songs that were actually recognizable. He found joy in worms after it rained, in the toy prizes at the bottom of cereal boxes, in the fact that every cloud had a different shape if you looked long enough. He was the kind of kid who made you believe, without trying, that the world was basically okay. Dela loved Tomas the way you love something that is fragile without knowing it is fragile. Carefully, completely, with both hands. The acting started by accident, the way the best things usually do. Dela was 11 years old when her school put on a shortened version of Romeo and Juliet. She had not tried out for any part. She had been assigned to move scenery, to carry wooden flats from one side of the stage to the other and try not to drop them. She was fine with this. She liked being useful. But the girl playing Juliet, a confident 6th grader named Priya Thathakari, who had been talking about this role since September, got the flu 3 days before the show. She got it badly. A real flu, the kind that pins you to your bed and makes you feel like your bones are made of wet paper. The drama teacher, Mrs. Olin, stood in front of the cast at rehearsal and looked like someone had told her the building was on fire. Mrs. Olin had been at that school for 22 years, and she was tired in the specific way that teachers get tired. Not from working too hard, but from caring too much for too long. And she looked around the room. Her eyes landed on Dela in the back row. "You," she said, "you've been at every rehearsal. Do you know the lines?" Dela did know the lines. All of them. Every single one. Not just Juliet's. All of them. She had memorized them the way some kids memorize batting averages or the order of the planets. Not on purpose. They had just stuck, the way certain things stick to certain people for reasons nobody can explain. She stood up. She walked to the front of the room. 20 kids watched her from the rows of chairs. She performed the balcony scene. Mrs. Olin sat down in the nearest chair. She pressed her hand over her mouth. The other kids went completely still. Not bored, still. Not polite, still. In the kind of still that happens when something real occurs in front of you and your body knows it before your brain does. When Dela finished, the silence lasted 4 full seconds. Then Tommy Burkett, the boy who had taken over Dela's scenery-moving role, who had never once volunteered attention toward anything school-related in his life, started clapping, slowly, then faster. Then the rest of them joined, and it filled that small rehearsal room like a sound much bigger than 12-year-olds should be able to make. That Friday night, Dela Voss stood on a stage in the gymnasium of Hollow Creek Elementary in front of 200 parents who had come prepared to suffer politely through a school play. They had planned to smile, to check their phones, to think about what they needed from the grocery store. They did not check their phones. They cried. Renata Voss sat in the 3rd row with Tomas heavy and warm on her lap, already half asleep, and she watched her daughter up on that stage and felt something happen in her chest that she could not find a word for. It was not sadness, though she was crying. It was bigger than sadness. It was like watching a door open that she hadn't known was there, like finding a room in a house you thought you knew completely. After the show, in the crowded hallway outside the gymnasium that smelled like floor wax and someone's casserole, Mrs. Olin found Renata. She stood in front of her, and she chose her words slowly, the way you choose words when you are trying to hold something fragile with language. "Your daughter," Mrs. Olin said, "is not like other children." Renata already knew. She had known since Dela was 3 years old and had stood at the window through a full thunderstorm, 45 minutes, lightning and everything, completely still, completely unafraid, watching it like it was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen, like it was speaking to her in a language she already understood. But hearing someone else say it out loud made it real in a different way, made it something she could hold. The years between that gymnasium and a real film set numbered 5. 5 years of community theater in Hollow Creek and 2 neighboring towns, with audiences that drove 30 miles on country roads because word had spread in the specific way that genuine things spread. Quietly, person to person, not because anyone was promoting it, but because people couldn't help telling each other. 5 years of videos that Renata filmed on her phone in portrait mode and uploaded to the internet, which gathered views slowly at first and then all at once, like a wave that has been building far out at sea and finally reaches the shore. 5 years of agents who said no and agents who said maybe, and then one Tuesday afternoon, a phone call from a woman named Celeste Park in Los Angeles, California, who had watched every video twice. Celeste said 3 words: "I believe her." Not "she's talented," not "she has potential," not the usual things that agents say when they are interested but not certain. Just 3 words said plainly, the way you state a fact you've already checked twice. "I believe her." That was the whole thing. That was always the whole thing with Dela Voss. When she stood inside a story, I mean when she was fully living inside a character, you believed her. Not because she had trained at a special school, not because she had perfect technique, but because she brought something real to it every single time, something that came from inside her and could not be faked by any amount of practice. The cold stone below her left collarbone, the click of that door. She carried all of it. Every piece of her life, everything she had never been able to say out loud, into every character she ever played. She gave it away freely, completely, every time, and somehow it never ran out. And now she was 16 years old, standing on a major film set in Albuquerque, New Mexico, with 1 green sock and 1 orange sock hidden inside her costume boots, holding a paper cup of hot chocolate with both hands. And the most famous actor in the history of American cinema had just offered her his hand. And she had stepped back, and she had shaken her head. And nobody on that set had any idea why. Not yet. Nobody on that set knew what had happened 2 weeks before that morning. That is the important thing. That is the whole thing. Because the story that the crew was already whispering about, young actress refuses handshake from legend, crew stunned, director furious, that story was missing almost everything. It had the picture but not the frame. It had the moment but not the years of life that had pushed Dela Voss to that moment. Like a river that has been running underground for a long time before it finally breaks through the surface. What the crew did not know was this. 14 days before filming began, Dela Voss had been sitting in the backseat of her mother's car in a hospital parking lot in Albuquerque, New Mexico. It was a Tuesday. It was raining. The kind of thin, cold rain that does not really fall so much as just hang in the air and make everything wet and gray and exhausting. Renata was in the driver's seat, turned sideways, both her hands folded in her lap. She was wearing her good coat, the dark blue one she saved for important days. It was the coat she wore to Dela's performances. It was the coat she had worn to the one-parent-teacher conference where a teacher had said in front of her that Dela was exceptional. She wore this coat when she needed to feel like she could handle something. Between them, sitting on the center console, was a piece of paper from the doctor, folded in half. It had been folded in half when the doctor handed it to them, and neither Renata nor Dela had unfolded it yet in the parking lot. They both knew what was on it. They had both just heard it. They just weren't ready to look at it again yet. Looking at it again would make it more real, and it was already as real as either of them could stand. Tomas was inside the hospital. Tomas, who was now 12 years old, who still whistled constantly through the gap in his front teeth, who had recently discovered astronomy with the full force of his personality and had spent 3 weekends covering the ceiling above his bed with glow-in-the-dark star stickers arranged into actual constellations that he had checked against a library book 3 times to make sure they were right. Tomas, who woke up happy every single morning, who laughed at his own jokes, who still collected the prizes from cereal boxes even though he was 12, because why would you stop doing something that was free and good? Tomas had been sick for 3 months, not the regular kind of sick, not the kind that you push through with orange juice and rest and a few days home from school, the kind that lingers, that takes things from you slowly, quietly, the way a tide takes sand, so gradually that by the time you notice, something important is already gone. The kind of sick that makes doctors fold papers in half before they hand them to you because they want to give you one more second before the words become permanent. The paper said that Thomas had a rare condition affecting his heart, a problem with the muscle itself, the way it moved, the rhythm it kept. It was serious. There was no softer word for it than serious. But, and this was the word that Renata had grabbed with both hands and refused to let go of, it was treatable. That word, treatable. She had heard it and felt it land inside her like something solid, like a floor. Treatable meant not over. Treatable meant there was still a path. The path was expensive, devastatingly expensive. The kind of expensive that looks at everything a family like theirs has ever saved or could ever save and says quietly and without cruelty, not even close. Dela had unfolded the paper. She had read it carefully, the way she read scripts, not rushing, taking in every word. Then she had folded it back up along the same crease. She set it back on the center console. She placed her hand on her mother's arm. "I'm going to do the movie," she said. Renata turned to look at her. Her eyes were red. She had been holding herself together so well inside the doctor's office, and now she was only barely holding together in the car, and hearing Dela say that, in that voice, with that steadiness, it cracked something open. "Dela, I'm going to do the movie," Dela said again. Her voice did not waver. "And I'm going to do it right, and it's going to be fine." She said it the way she said lines on stage, not performed, not put on, but said with her entire body behind every word, with the cold stone below her left collarbone, pushing each syllable forward like it was the engine of them. She believed it. She had to believe it, believing it was the only option she could afford. And the film was called The Weight of What Was. It was a serious picture. a historical drama set in 1962 about a young girl who witnesses something the adults around her want to pretend never happened, and who has to decide whether to speak or to stay silent. It was the kind of story that required a lead actress who could carry real pain inside a performance without spilling it, who could hold something true and heavy and still move through a scene with grace. Dela had been cast because she could do that better than anyone the director had ever seen. The money from the film, not a Hollywood fortune, but more money than their family had ever had in one place, would go directly to Tomas's treatment. Every dollar of it. That was the only reason Dela had signed the contract. That was the only reason she had gotten on the plane. That was the only reason she was in Albuquerque at all. Tomas was the reason for everything. Now here is the part the crew did not know. Here is the thing that explains the moment everybody watched and got completely wrong. 3 days before filming started, Dela caught a cold. A small one. The sniffling kind. The scratchy throat kind. The kind that under normal circumstances means nothing worse than a box of tissues and some extra sleep. The kind of cold that would have been embarrassing to even mention to a doctor. But the doctor treating Tomas had sat down with Dela and Renata at the start of his treatment and explained carefully in plain language that during certain phases, Tomas's immune system would be in a weakened state. That during those phases, an infection that a healthy person would shake off in 3 days could hit Tomas much harder. That it was important. The doctor had used that word, important, which Dela had understood to mean, please take this seriously, please. That they limit his exposure to germs coming in from outside. Dela had taken this seriously. She took it so seriously that she had spent the morning of day one keeping her hands in her jacket pockets or wrapped around her cup. She had smiled at everyone on that set. She had said good morning to the camera operator and the lighting crew and the wardrobe assistant and the 2 men who operated the craft table. She had been warm. She had been present. She had just not touched anyone. Not Gerald Foss when he reached for her hand in greeting. She had given him a smile and a nod and moved on quickly enough that he hadn't had time to feel insulted. Not the assistant directors. Not the script supervisor who had offered a friendly fist bump. Nobody. Not a single person. Because she could not risk it. She knew logically, she truly knew, that the chain of events between shaking someone's hand on a film set in Albuquerque and passing a cold to Tomas 400 miles away in a Hollow Creek hospital was long and unlikely. She knew that she would wash her hands. She knew that Tomas was in a controlled environment with nurses and protocols. She knew that probably, almost certainly, nothing would happen. But probably was not good enough. Almost certainly was not good enough. Not when it was Tomas. Not when it was his heart. So when Clint Eastwood, 93 years old, and a man whose handshake people had traveled from other countries just to receive, stood in front of her and extended his hand, she looked at it, and she thought of Tomas lying in a hospital bed with glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling above him. And she took one step backward, and she placed her paper cup on the table, and she shook her head. She could not explain it. Not in the second it would take to explain it. Not in any way that would have made sense to 25 watching crew members who had no knowledge of parking lots or folded papers or rare conditions or the specific terror of loving someone fragile. So she said nothing. She just shook her head, and the crew stared. And Gerald Foss looked like he had seen someone kick a statue, and Clint Eastwood smiled. And in the silence that followed, in those 2 or 3 seconds when the whole set held its breath, nobody could have guessed what was about to happen next. Not even Dela. He put his hand down. Not fast, not with embarrassment or frustration, the way a person pulls back a hand that has been rejected. He lowered it slowly, deliberately, the way you set down a glass you have finished with. Carefully, completely, with no remaining business between you and the glass. There was no anger in it, no wounded pride, just a hand going back to where it came from, quietly, like it had never needed anything from the moment at all. He looked at Dela Voss. His face did not change. 93 years of living had given Clint Eastwood a face that did not change easily. But something shifted around his eyes. A slight tightening. The way eyes tighten when a person is looking at something and working hard to understand all of it at once. He looked at her, the way you look at a painting that you know is important before you know why it's important. He took her in completely. Then he said, "All right." One word. That was all. Just, all right. He turned and he walked toward the director's area, and behind him the entire crew exhaled. Slowly, carefully, like people who weren't sure the danger had actually passed. Gerald Foss met him halfway. The crew could not hear what was said. From where they stood, they could only watch. Gerald talking fast, his hands cutting shapes in the air, the way his hands always did when he was upset and trying not to show that he was upset. And Clint standing completely still, listening. Clint listened the way very old trees stand in wind, absorbing everything, moving nothing, completely unimpressed by the force of it. When Gerald finally stopped talking, Clint said something back. 3 words, maybe 4. That was it. Gerald blinked. His mouth opened slightly and then closed again, like a thought that had started and changed its mind. Clint turned and walked toward the craft table. Later that morning, Bev Okafor, the first assistant director, a woman who had worked with Gerald for 6 years and who had a rare ability to read the temperature of any room she entered, found Gerald by the monitor and asked him quietly what Clint had said. Gerald was silent for a moment. He looked at his clipboard, though he was not reading it. "He said to leave her alone," Gerald said. Bev stared at him. He also said he wanted to know about her lighting preferences," Gerald added, which made no sense to Bev and no additional sense to Gerald either, who had spent the last 10 minutes trying to understand it and had not gotten very far. They left it there. There was a film to make. The first scene of the day was simple. Dela's character, a 12-year-old girl named Ruth, stands alone in a wheat field and watches a military vehicle pass slowly on the road at the far edge of the field. That is all. Ruth watches. Ruth's face does what Ruth's face does. End of scene. Gerald had scheduled 30 minutes for it, which meant he expected 2 or 3 takes, maybe 4 if something technical went wrong. They shot it once. Dela Voss stood in that wheat field with the wind coming across it from the west, bending the tops of the stalks in long, slow waves, and she watched the vehicle move along the road in the distance. And her face did exactly what Ruth's face needed to do, which was nothing and everything at the same time. Fear sitting so far down underneath her stillness that you could only feel it, the way you feel cold water moving under ice. Stillness on top of everything else. The weight of a secret held so long it has become part of the body. Gerald watched the monitor. He watched it for the full length of the take. When the vehicle had passed and the field was still again, and Devin Ashby, the camera operator, slowly pulled back, Gerald sat without speaking for a long time. Then he said, "That's it. Moving on." The crew looked at each other. One take. For a scene this significant on the first day, airs with a 16-year-old lead. One take. Devin Ashby lowered his camera and looked through the viewfinder one more time at nothing, just to have somewhere to look while he processed what he had just filmed. Nobody said anything. They moved on. On her way back from the field to base camp, Dela passed the craft table. She had her script tucked under one arm and her paper cup in both hands and her head slightly down, the way it went when she was still inside a scene, still traveling back from wherever she had gone to find Ruth. Clint Eastwood was at the craft table. He had a coffee and an old book with a cracked spine, and he was reading it with the focused attention of someone who has no interest in being anywhere else. He did not look up when Dela passed, and he simply slid a small bottle of hand sanitizer along the surface of the table toward her. No words, no look, just the bottle, moving quietly across the table in her direction, like a message passed in a language that didn't need sound. Dela stopped. She looked at the bottle. She looked at him. He turned a page. She picked up the bottle. She used it thoroughly, both hands between every finger. She set it back down in front of him. "Thank you," she said. Her voice was quiet and completely genuine. He said, still looking at his book. She walked on. She had taken about 10 steps when his voice came after her. Low, unhurried, aimed at nobody and everybody at once. "My daughter had asthma when she was small," he said. "Bad kind. The kind that woke her up at night." He paused. "Scared me every single time. Every single one." Dela stopped walking. She turned around slowly. He was still looking at his book, but the quality of his stillness had changed. He was no longer reading. He was somewhere else entirely. "You think it gets easier," he said, quieter now, "being scared for someone you love. You think after enough times you get used to it." He turned a page. "You don't." He read the page. Actually read it this time. Dela stood there. She was aware of the field behind her, the crew ahead of her, the script under her arm, the cold stone below her left collarbone. She was aware of all of it, and she was also aware of something new, something she had not felt since the parking lot, since the folded paper, since Renata's hands folded in her lap. The stone shifted, not gone. It was never going to be gone. But it moved, a quarter inch, maybe less, as though it had made a small amount of room for something else to exist beside it. Something warmer, something that did not have a name yet, but that felt, for the first time in weeks, like company. She did not say anything back to him. There was nothing to say that would have fit inside the moment without making it smaller. So she nodded once. A real nod, slow and certain, even though he could not see it, and she walked back to base camp. That night she sat on the floor of her hotel room with her back against the bed and her phone pressed to her ear, and she called Renata. "He knew," she said, before Renata could say hello. "Who knew?" "What?" Renata's voice was tired but alert, the way it always was when Dela called late. "Clint Eastwood," Dela said. "He knew. Not everything. I don't think he knew everything. But he saw something. He looked at me, and he saw something, and he didn't ask me to explain it. He did something kind, and then he told me about his daughter, and I don't know how to explain it except that he saw me, without me having to say a single word about any of it. He just looked and he saw." Renata was quiet for a moment. "How's the movie going?" she asked finally. Her voice had shifted, softer now, the way it went when she was trying not to cry. "Good," Dela said. "Really good, I think." "And you," Renata said. "Not the movie. You." The cold stone, the click of the door, Tomas with his glow-in-the-dark stars 400 miles away. "I'm okay," Dela said. She let the words sit in the air between them. She tested them. She turned them over. "Actually," she said, "I think I might actually be okay." It was the first time she had meant it in weeks. Not completely, not all the way, but enough. Just enough to get to tomorrow. And tomorrow, on a film set in Albuquerque, something even larger was waiting. By the end of the first week of filming, something had happened on that set that nobody had a word for. This is common on bad sets. On bad sets, nobody has a word for what is happening because what is happening is disorganized or joyless or quietly falling apart. And people instinctively avoid naming those things out loud. But this was different. This was a set where people kept stopping in the middle of doing their jobs. Just for a second, just for a breath. Because something was occurring that they did not want to miss. Something they sensed. The way animals sense weather changing before humans do, that they would want to remember later, that they were going to be asked about one day, that they were going to tell their kids about. Film sets have a feeling to them. Every single one is different. Some feel like factories. Efficient, bright, cold, move fast and go home. Some feel like organized chaos, everyone running slightly behind and pretending they are not. Some feel competitive, like everyone is quietly keeping score. And some, only rarely, only when every condition lines up the way conditions almost never do, feel like something sacred is happening inside them. Like the work being done there matters in a way that goes beyond the screen it will eventually appear on. The weight of what was had become that last kind. It started with Dela. She was the center of everything, the source from which the feelings spread outward. Every scene she was in, every single one, not just the big ones, not just the difficult ones, but the small connector scenes and the background moments and the scenes that would end up lasting 40 seconds in the final cut, she brought something to all of them that was impossible to manufacture. Something that directors spend entire careers trying to coax out of actors and mostly can't. Something that no acting class teaches because it cannot be taught. It can only be carried. And Dela Voss had been carrying it her whole life without knowing that was what she was doing. She was playing a girl named Ruth, 12 years old, 1962. A girl who has watched something terrible happen to her neighbor. Something that the adults around her, One by one, I have decided it is easier and safer to pretend did not happen. Ruth has been told to be quiet. She has been told she was mistaken. She has been told in the gentle and devastating way that children are sometimes told the most damaging things, that what she saw was not what she saw. The story of Ruth was the story of what happens when a child is handed a truth too heavy for her and chooses to carry it anyway. When a child decides that what is right matters more than what is easy. The crew noticed, in the way you notice something you are almost afraid to name, because naming it might break it, that Dela Voss was not performing this. She was living it, not Ruth's exact life, not 1962 and the neighbor and the terrible thing, but the underneath of it, the texture of it, and the specific experience of being young and scared and holding something that the world around you keeps asking you to put down. She brought all of it, the fear for Tomas, the money that had to come from this job, the hotel room floor at 2 a.m, the exhaustion of being brave for so long that brave had stopped feeling like a choice and had become simply the only way she knew how to breathe. She brought every ounce of it into Ruth, and Ruth received it and became real in a way that made the crew uncomfortable in the best possible way. She was bringing the click of that door, the one that had closed softly on a winter night when she was 4 years old, the one she had carried below her left collarbone like a compass stone ever since. She was bringing it into 1962 and putting it in Ruth's hands. Cousin Ruth held it like she had always had it, like it had always been hers. Bev Okafor, who had worked first assistant director on 37 films across 22 years, who had once worked on a film shot entirely inside a flooding building, and before that, a film about survivors of a natural disaster that required 3 weeks of interviews with real survivors before production began, and who had a personal policy of absolute professional detachment because she had seen what happened to crew members who got emotionally involved. Bev Okafor said later, in an interview conducted months after the film's release, that watching Dela Voss work during that first week was the closest she had ever come to crying on a film set. She paused when she said it. Then she added, "And I worked on a film about a tsunami. Clint Eastwood had 4 scenes with Dela in the script. He played a character named Judge Hartley, a powerful man, formal and old-fashioned, who has spent his whole career doing things the way things are done, and who encounters Ruth at a moment when doing things the way things are done would mean letting an injustice stand. The character was written as intimidating, as a wall that Ruth has to somehow get through." Gerald had staged their first scene as a confrontation. 2 people at a table, Ruth small and scared. Judge Hartley large and formal and not yet decided. The tension between them supposed to be the scene. Gerald called action. What happened was something that had not been in any rehearsal. Clint Eastwood leaned forward in his chair, just slightly, just enough to close the distance across the table by a few inches. And he looked at Dela Voss with his pale winter eyes and he listened. Not Judge Hartley listening to Ruth. Clint Eastwood listening to Dela Voss. Listening to everything she had brought into that room from her real life. Everything she had been carrying since a parking lot in the rain and a piece of paper folded in half. He heard all of it. You could see him hearing it, and he gave it back to her through his eyes. All of it. Acknowledged, received, held. Dela's eyes filled with tears. Not Ruth's tears. Not performed tears. Not tears she had found in a rehearsal room by remembering something sad. These were Dela's tears, arriving from a place inside her that had been sealed shut for weeks by sheer necessity, suddenly and without warning finding a crack. She let them come for exactly 1 second. And then, because she was extraordinary. Because the thing that made her extraordinary was not the ability to feel things, but the ability to know what to do with the things she felt. She pulled those tears through the door between herself and Ruth, and she made them Ruth's, and they fit perfectly. Of course they fit. Ruth was also a girl who was carrying too much. Ruth was also a girl who had been asked to be braver than any person her age should have to be. Ruth was also a girl who had a cold stone somewhere inside her that she had never been able to put down. The tears were Ruth's and Dela's at the same time, exactly equally. You could not have separated them. Gerald did not call cut. He watched the monitor, and he did not call cut for a long time. The scene ran past where it was supposed to end, past where the lighting was perfect, past where any reasonable director would have said, "That's enough." He did not call cut because stopping it felt like a crime. When he finally did, the soundstage was absolutely silent. Devin Ashby stood behind his camera and blinked, rapidly, several times. Devin Ashby had filmed in war zones. He had a rule about feelings on set, and the rule was that he did not have them. He was blinking rapidly and not acknowledging that he was blinking rapidly. The sound mixer, a woman named Preeti Rajan, who wore the same gray cap every single day of every shoot she had ever worked, had her hand pressed over her mouth. Clint Eastwood sat back in his chair. He looked across the table at Dela for a long, quiet moment. Then he nodded, slowly. The way you nod at something you understand completely, it's something that requires no further discussion. "That's the scene," he said to Gerald. Gerald nodded once. He did not trust his voice. That evening, the production's publicist, a young man named Arlo Menz, who was 8 months into his first real job in film and who still had the quality of a person who had not yet learned to pretend to be unimpressed by things, sat in his car in the parking lot of the hotel and tried to write a message to the studio about what he had witnessed that day. He wrote 3 full drafts. He deleted all of them. They were not wrong exactly. They just were not close to right. The words he had access to were not the right size for what had happened in that room. Finally, he sent 6 words. "Something extraordinary is happening here." Truly. The studio replied in 11 minutes. "Define extraordinary." Arlo looked at his phone. He put it face down on the passenger seat. He stared at the windshield. He couldn't define it. That was entirely the point. Across the city, in a different room of a different building, Thomas Voss lay in his hospital bed looking up at the ceiling. Renata had taped glow-in-the-dark star stickers up there during the first week, arranging them carefully from a library book, constellation by constellation, because she knew that a ceiling full of the right stars was the closest thing to home she could give him inside those walls. He was naming them, quietly to himself: Orion, Cassiopeia, the Big Dipper. His lips moved slightly with each one. Outside his window, the real sky was doing the same thing it always did, holding more light than any one person could take in, spreading it out across the dark without asking anything in return. He did not know what his sister had done that day. He did not know what she had given away on a film set across the city, or what it had looked like when she gave it, or how many people had stood in complete silence afterward because they did not know what else to do. But something warm moved through him as he lay there looking at his ceiling stars. Something like a hand finding his hand in the dark. Steady and certain and completely sure. He smiled at Orion. He closed his eyes. He slept. It happened on a Thursday, the 14th day of filming. The crew had been working since 6 in the morning. By 7 in the evening, they were in that particular state of exhaustion that only film crews understand. Not the kind that makes you useless, but the kind that strips everything down to its bones. The kind that makes you stop performing professionalism and just be a person who is tired and has done something real today. The lights were being broken down. Cases were being latched. Someone was wheeling a dolly across the concrete floor of the soundstage, and the wheels made a low rumbling sound that filled the space like distant thunder. Dela had finished her last scene of the day 40 minutes ago. It had been a long one, a hard one. Ruth's testimony scene, the scene in which Ruth stands before a room of adults and says plainly and without decoration what she saw, what really happened. What everyone in that room has been working very hard to unhappen with their silence. It was the scene that the whole film had been building toward for 4 weeks of script pages. 5 minutes of screen time that required Dela to be completely open, completely without armor, to stand in front of the camera with nothing between herself and the audience. No protection at all. She had done it in 2 takes. The first was extraordinary. The second was better. Now she was sitting in a folding chair in a quiet corner of the soundstage, still in her 1962 costume, while Soo-Jin Park carefully removed her stage makeup. Soo-Jin was the kind of person whose presence was itself a form of rest. She moved gently. She never rushed. She understood, without anyone ever having to tell her, that the time between the end of a hard scene and the return to the ordinary world needed to be treated carefully. The way you treat something that is still warm, still alive, still deciding what shape it wants to settle into. Sujin never talked during these moments. It was her gift to every actor she had ever worked with, and most of them never knew to thank her for it because they didn't know it was a choice. It was always a choice. Clint Eastwood came into the corner of the soundstage and sat down, not next to Dela, not close enough to intrude, just nearby. The way a person sits when they are not trying to start a conversation, but are not opposed to one starting on its own. He had changed out of his Judge Hartley costume. He was wearing a plain flannel shirt, dark gray, with the kind of shirt a man wears when he is not trying to be anything to anybody. He had a coffee cup. His book was not with him tonight. He just sat, the way very old people sometimes sit, like sitting itself is a complete activity that requires no further justification. In the low light of the winding down soundstage, he looked older than he did on camera. That was unusual. Most people look younger in soft light, but Clint Eastwood in that moment looked every single one of his 93 years, and none of them looked wasted. All of them looked used, fully and deliberately used. Sujin finished the last of Dela's makeup. She gathered her brushes and her cotton pads. She glanced once between Dela and the old man sitting nearby, and then, quietly without explanation, in a way that broke her own usual routine, she picked up her kit and moved away to another part of the room. She did not know exactly why she did it. She knew that she should. Dela was looking at her phone. There was a message from Renata. 3 words. Just 3. Better today. Breathing. Dela read it twice. She let out a breath so slow and so quiet that it was almost not a sound at all. Just air leaving a body that had been holding it too long. Better today. Breathing. Good news? Clint's voice was low. Not the voice from the movies. Not Judge Hartley's voice. Not any character's voice. Just his voice. The one underneath all the others. Old and worn smooth, the way river stones get worn smooth. Like good furniture that has been lived with for a long time and is better for it. Dela looked over at him. Her first instinct, the one that had kept her functional for 2 weeks on the set, was to deflect, to smile and say something light, something that kept things on the surface where they were manageable. She was very good at this. She had practiced it every day since the parking lot. She had gotten so good at being fine that sometimes she almost fooled herself. But she was tired, bone deep tired, testimony scene tired. The kind of tired that does not leave enough energy left over to maintain a version of yourself that isn't true. My brother, she said, he's sick. She had not said it out loud to anyone on this set. Not to Gerald, not to Bev, not to Devin or Preeti or Arlo or any of the 25 people she spent every waking hour standing next to. She had carried it in complete silence for 14 days, and hearing herself say it now, just those 4 words, my brother, he's sick, was like setting down something that had been cutting into her palms without her realizing how badly. Clint did not react the way people reacted. He did not lean forward. He did not make a face of immediate sympathy. He did not say the word sorry or the word oh, or begin the particular series of sounds that people make when they encounter hard news and do not know what to do with it. He just nodded, once, slowly. The nod of a person who has received hard news before and knows that what it needs first is not words. It needs to be allowed to exist in the air for a moment without being rushed at. How old? He asked. 12. He nodded again. What's his name? Tomas. He said it back quietly, not to her, just to himself. When the way you say a word when you want to remember it, when you are putting it somewhere specific inside yourself so it will still be there when you need it. Dela looked at her phone again, at the 3 words, better today, breathing. Then she looked up at the soundstage ceiling, the mess of rigs and cables and steel far above them. And something came out of her that she hadn't planned, something light and small and real. He likes astronomy, she said. He covered his whole ceiling in glow-in-the-dark stars, actual constellations. He checked them against the library book to make sure they were right. She paused. He's 12 and he checked them against a library book. The corner of Clint's mouth moved, just slightly. That's a good thing to care about, he said. The stars. He looked up at the ceiling too. at the cables and the rigs. Most people never look up long enough. They sat quietly for a moment. Around them, the soundstage continued its slow wind down. Wheels rolling, cases closing. People moving with the particular careful exhaustion of people who have done good work and know it. "The first day," Dela said, her voice was careful, when I stepped back from your hand." "You don't need to explain it," he said. "I want to." She kept her eyes on the ceiling. "I had a cold, small one. But Tomas, during his treatment, his immune system gets weak. The doctor said any infection from outside could make things harder for him." She paused. "I wasn't going to shake anyone's hand. I hadn't all morning. And then you walked over and I couldn't explain it fast enough. So I didn't." She lowered her eyes and looked at him directly. "I'm sorry. I should have found a way to explain it." "It doesn't seem like anything," Clint said. His voice was completely level. "It makes sense. Any parent would understand it." He looked at his coffee cup. "Any person who has ever been scared for someone they love would understand it completely." She held his gaze for a moment. This man, this person who had been famous since before her mother was born, who had made films that her grandmother had watched so many times she could say the lines along with the screen, her grandmother who had called him the last real one, in a voice full of complete certainty, "The way you say things you have tested and found true." "My grandmother loved your work," Dela said. "Every film." She could quote whole scenes. She smiled, and it was a real smile, the kind that starts deep in the eyes before it reaches the mouth, the kind that cannot be imitated. "She called you the last real one." Something moved across Clint Eastwood's face, something that came from far inside and passed through quickly. Grief and gratitude and something else she didn't have a name for. And then settled into a stillness that was softer than his usual stillness. "What happened to her?" he asked. "She passed 4 years ago." He nodded slowly. "I'm sorry for it." "She would have lost her mind knowing I was here." Dela laughed. Actually laughed. The small surprise kind that arrives before you can decide whether to let it. "She would have made me get your autograph on about 15 different things." Clint smiled. The real one. Wayne, the one that nobody on this set had seen until now. "You know why I took this job?" he said. She shook her head. He looked at his coffee cup, at the steam still rising from it, thin and quiet. "Because of you," he said. "I read about you, watched everything I could find, told my people I wanted to be part of whatever you were building." He set the cup down. "At my age, you stop doing things for the wrong reasons. You get very clear very fast about what's worth your time." He looked at her directly. "You are worth the time." The cold stone below Dela's left collarbone, the one that had lived there since she was 4 years old, since a door closed softly in the dark, shifted again, further than it had on day one when he had slid the hand sanitizer across the table. Further than it had moved in years, not gone. It would never be entirely gone, but it was making room now, actively and deliberately making room, the way a crowded house makes room when someone important arrives. She did not have a line for this moment. There was no character to step inside of. It was just her. Dela Voss, 16 years old, from Hollow Creek, West Virginia, sitting in a folding chair in a soundstage in Albuquerque, New Mexico, with her 1962 costume still on and her real face showing, and the most important person she had ever met in her life, telling her she was worth his time. "Thank you," she said. Very small, completely real. "Don't thank me," he said. "Just keep doing what you're doing." He stood. He picked up his coffee. He walked toward the exit at the far end of the soundstage, moving with that slow and certain forward motion that never seemed to hurry and never seemed to doubt. He stopped at the door. He did not turn around. "Tomas," he said. His voice carried easily across the quiet room. "Tell him, Orion's belt, 3 stars in a row. On a cloudy night when everything else is hidden, you can almost always still find the belt." A pause. "Tell him to look for the belt first." And then the door opened and closed, and he was gone. Dela sat in the folding chair. The soundstage was nearly empty now. A single crew member was coiling a cable in the far corner. The overhead lights had been dimmed to the low amber of a room that is almost finished with its day. She looked at her phone. She opened her messages to Renata. She typed, "Tell Tomas, Orion's belt. 3 stars in a row. He can always find it. Or tell him to look for the belt first. Tell him tonight." She sent it. She set the phone face up on her knee and she waited. 2 minutes and 40 seconds later, she counted, a reply arrived. Not words, a photo. Taken from across a hospital room, slightly blurry the way phone photos are when someone takes them in a hurry because they do not want to miss the moment. Tomas, his face at the window, chin slightly tilted up, eyes on the sky, looking for the belt, looking for the 3 stars. Dela pressed the phone against her chest and closed her eyes and breathed. There are scenes in films that everyone present for them carries for the rest of their lives. Not the big expensive scenes, not the ones with the most cameras or the most extras or the most months of preparation. Those scenes are remembered differently. Remembered the way you remember a fireworks display, for the scale of it, for the spectacle. The scenes that truly stay are the quiet ones, the ones where something real happened inside the work, where the performance and the truth underneath the performance became the same thing, completely and without gap, and everyone in the room felt it happen and knew, without being able to explain why, that they were standing inside a moment they would not forget. Day 21 was that kind of day, that kind of scene. The set was Judge Hartley's private chambers, built on the main soundstage. Dark wood paneling, a heavy desk, 2 chairs facing each other across a table that the production designer had aged deliberately to look like it had witnessed 100 difficult conversations before this one. The lighting was low and warm, the color of late afternoon coming through old glass. It looked exactly like 1962. It felt heavier than 1962. It felt like every year stacked on top of that one. In the script, the scene was 4 pages, marked simply, Interior, Judge's Chambers. Day. Ruth arrives alone. She is frightened. Judge Hartley is supposed to reassure her before her final testimony. He is supposed to be measured and formal and strong in the way that strong men in 1962 understood strength. Controlled, upright, few words, all of them chosen carefully. Gerald had gone through the scene in the morning rehearsal. Blocking was simple. Dialogue was clear. He expected 3 takes, maybe 4. He had scheduled 45 minutes. It was not the scene he was worried about. There were bigger scenes on either side of it. This one was connective tissue. This one was the bridge between the hard parts. He was wrong about that. He would know at the moment it began. Gerald called action. Dela came through the door as Ruth, small, careful, the way you move through a space when you are not sure if it is safe. She sat across the table from Judge Hartley, and she folded her hands in her lap, and she looked at Clint Eastwood with Ruth's eyes, which were wide and watchful and full of the specific fear of a child who has told the truth before and been told she was wrong. She began her lines. She delivered them the way she had been delivering Ruth all through filming, from the inside out, from the real thing outward into the character, never the other direction. Her voice was steady. Her hands in her lap did not move. She was doing the work, doing it well, doing it exactly as rehearsed. And then Clint Eastwood stopped talking. He had lines. There were lines in the script for this moment, Judge Hartley's measured, formal words of reassurance, his careful promise that the truth would be heard. But Clint Eastwood did not say them. He set them down, completely and without apology, the way he had set down his hand on day 1, and for exactly the same reason. He looked at Dela Voss across that table. He looked at her with 93 years behind his eyes, with every loss he had ever sat with, every person he had loved and watched struggle and been unable to fix because some things cannot be fixed. They can only be accompanied. He looked at her with all of that and he gave it to her across the table without a single word, with the way you give warmth, not by handing it over, but by simply being close enough that it moves on its own. Dela felt it arrive. Her face changed. Not a performance change, not the kind of shift an actor makes when they are adjusting a choice. This was something underneath the performance, something that happened to Dela before it happened to Ruth. Recognition moving through her like a key turning, like a door opening that had been sealed so long, she had almost forgotten it was there. She began to speak. The words that came were Ruth's words in shape and meaning. But the texture of them, the breath inside each one, the specific weight of each pause, those were Dela's. They came from a hotel room floor at 2 in the morning, from a parking lot in the rain, made from a piece of paper folded in half and the word treatable and the click of a door on a winter night when she was 4 years old. "I don't want to be brave anymore," she said. Her voice was just above silence. "I am so tired. I just want him to be. I just want everything to go back to." She stopped. 1 breath. 2. She caught herself at the exact edge of the door between Ruth and Dela. She stood there at the seam, fully in both places, and then she made a choice. The same choice she made in every performance, the same extraordinary, invisible, unrepeatable choice, to take what was Dela's and make it Ruth's, to carry her own truth into Ruth's story and find that it fit perfectly, because Ruth was also a girl who was tired of being brave. Ruth was also a girl who wanted the world to stop asking so much of her. Ruth was also a girl who loved someone and was terrified and had no one to say that to out loud. The tears came, real ones, from the deepest place she had. Across the table, Clint Eastwood leaned forward very slightly. His voice, when it came, was not Judge Hartley's voice. It was the flannel shirt voice, the worn, smooth Riverstone voice, coming through the character like light through thin cloth. Not pretending to be the character anymore, just being himself, which was the only thing he had ever truly known how to be. "It's going to be okay," he said. 4 words, no decoration, no ceremony, just the absolute and quiet certainty of a man who had lived long enough to know the difference between the things that end badly and the things that find their way through. Saying it to this girl, this specific girl across this table. Because he meant it, and because she needed to hear it from someone who had been around long enough to mean it. Dela heard him. Not Ruth. Dela. Her chin dropped to her chest. 3 breaths. Slow, shaking, real. Then she lifted her head, and she was Ruth. Completely, purely, devastatingly Ruth. And she finished the scene with a steadiness and a precision and a power that made Devin Ashby, standing behind his camera with his eye pressed to the viewfinder, refuse to move. He held the shot past where he was supposed to. He held it because moving felt wrong, because breaking the frame felt like a kind of violence against what was happening inside it. Gerald Foss did not call cut. He stood at the monitor with tears running down his face without knowing they were there, until Bev Okafor touched his arm gently. And he reached up and felt his own cheek and looked at his fingers and said nothing. There was nothing to say. The scene had finished itself. Then he called cut, and nobody moved. The soundstage held its silence for 4 full seconds. 4 seconds is a very long time in a room full of people. Then Devin Ashby lowered his camera from his face. He looked at it. He looked at the set. He looked at no one in particular. "That," he said quietly to the air, "is the greatest thing I have ever filmed." Someone started clapping. Then someone else, then all of them. 23 crew members standing in a soundstage in Albuquerque on a Wednesday afternoon, people who had learned a long time ago to be professional and detached and to never, under any circumstances, applaud during a shoot. All of them applauding, not politely, and with their whole hands. Dela sat at the table. She pressed her palms flat against the wood and felt its solidity and breathed. In and out, coming back slowly from wherever she had been. Clint Eastwood stood up from his chair. He walked around the table without hurrying. He stood beside her and he looked down at her for a moment. At this girl in her 1962 dress, with her real face showing and her real tears still drying on her real cheeks. He extended his hand, slowly, the same hand he had extended on day 1 in the same room. No, not the same room, but the same gesture with the same intention underneath it, which had always been, "I see you," which had always been, "You are not alone in this." Dela looked at his hand. She looked at his face. She took it. Not a handshake. Not formal, not professional. Not the kind of hand-taking that happens at the beginning of things. The kind that happens at the end of something real. Both of them holding on with full hands, completely, the way you hold something you know is important. The crew saw it. Every single one of them saw it and understood that something had come full circle, that a story had closed on itself cleanly, the way the best stories do, the way life almost never does, but sometimes, just sometimes does. Bev Okafor pulled out her phone. She had a strict personal rule about phones on set. She had enforced that rule on other people on this very shoot. She broke it without a moment of hesitation. She raised it. She took the photo. It was blurry. The lighting was uneven. It was not a good photo by any technical measure. It was the truest thing anyone took a picture of that entire year. A young girl with one green sock and one orange sock visible beneath the hem of her 1962 dress, holding the hand of a man who was a living piece of American history, both of them looking at each other with the specific expression of two people who have shared something that cannot be explained to anyone who was not in the room. Two people who knew. On the last day of principal photography, day 44, a package arrived at the production office at 10:22 in the morning. Nobody had been expecting it. There was no record of it being sent. It had not come through the studio's mail system or the production's regular delivery address. It came through the regular postal service, like something an ordinary person had simply put in the mail, in which made it stand out on a film set the same way a handwritten letter stands out inside a stack of printed envelopes. It was wrapped in plain brown paper, tied closed with actual string, the kind of string you find in old hardware stores, the kind that still smells faintly of whatever was stored near it. The return address was a P.O. box in Carmel, California. No name. Arlo Menz signed for it. He turned it over in his hands twice, then read the label again. It was addressed clearly and specifically to Dela Voss, care of the production. Not to her agent, not to the studio. To her by name, at this address, on this day. He carried it to Dela's trailer and knocked. She opened the door. She was still in her costume from the morning's work. A plain cotton dress from 1962 that the wardrobe department had washed so many times over the course of production that it had begun to look genuinely old, genuinely lived in, genuinely hers. She had her script in one hand. She looked at the package in Arlo's hands and then at Arlo's face. "I don't know who it's from," Arlo said, because the P.O. box meant nothing to him, because he was 26 years old and had not yet learned to recognize the handwriting of the man who had written the address label in large, slightly leaning, completely confident letters. Dela looked at the label. She knew the handwriting. "Thank you, Arlo," she said. She took the package. She closed the trailer door softly behind her. She stood in the middle of the small trailer space, the couch along one wall, the mirror along another, her own clothes folded on the chair in the corner. And she held the package in both hands and did not open it immediately. It had weight to it. Not just physical weight, though it was heavier than she expected, heavier than something its size should be. It had the other kind of weight, the kind that collects around objects that matter. She stood with it for a long moment, the way you stand with something before you are ready to know what it is. Then she sat on the couch. She set the package on her lap. She unwound the string carefully, the way it had clearly been wound, slowly with intention. She peeled back the brown paper one fold at a time. Inside was a book, hardcover, navy blue, so dark it was almost black. Old. And in the way that books become old, when they have been handled and carried and set down and picked up again, many times over many years. The spine had no title on it because it was not that kind of book. It was a journal. Filled from what she could see at the edges of the pages, completely, every page written in, a whole life or a piece of one, set down in ink. She opened the front cover. The inscription was in the same handwriting as the address label, large, slightly leaning to the right, utterly and completely sure of itself, the way a person writes when they have long since stopped being uncertain about what they mean. For Dela Voss, who already knows everything this book might try to tell her. But sometimes it helps to hear it from someone who has been around long enough to mean it. CE below the initials. E written separately, underlined once, page 47. She turned to page 47 with both hands carefully, the way you turn pages in something old and irreplaceable. The page held a story, handwritten, 3 full pages, front and back of 46 and 47, and carrying over to 48. The story of a young actor who was not named in the telling of it, but who was clearly, unmistakably real. A young man who had arrived on his first major film set in the summer of 1964 so frightened that he had barely slept the night before. Who had made a serious mistake on the very first day, a mistake in front of the entire crew that had left him standing alone in his humiliation, while the people around him moved on as though nothing had happened, which was somehow worse than if they had acknowledged it. Who had spent the following 3 weeks living inside the absolute certainty that he was about to be removed from the film, that someone would come to his trailer door and say quietly that they had decided to go a different direction, that the whole thing would end before he had proven anything to anyone, including himself. He had not been replaced. He had stayed, and he had gotten through it not by finding courage somewhere he had not looked before, not by becoming a different or braver version of himself, but by making one single decision very quietly in the dark of an early morning on the 4th day of shooting, when the fear was the loudest it had been. He decided that the fear did not get to make decisions for him anymore. That was all. That was the whole thing. The fear could stay. It was going to stay regardless, and it was going to be there every single day, but it did not get to be in charge. Something else was in charge. The last line of the story, written at the bottom of page 48 in slightly larger letters than everything before it, read, "The only thing that saved me was remembering who I was doing it for." Dela read it once. She read it again. She read it a third time. Then she pressed the journal flat against her chest, the same way she had pressed her phone against her chest 2 weeks before in the empty soundstage, and she stared at the ceiling of the trailer, which was white and plain and had nothing on it at all. No stars, no constellations, just a ceiling. She called Renata. It rang twice. Then her mother's voice, already careful, already reading something in the single ring before Dela had said anything. "Hey, are you okay?" "I need to read you something," Dela said. She read the whole story aloud, all 3 pages. Her voice held steady for the first page and most of the second, and then began to thin toward the end. The way her voice went when she was keeping something large inside a small space, when the space was almost full. She read the last line, "The only thing that saved me was remembering who I was doing it for," and stopped. The silence on the phone lasted a long time. "Who I'm doing it for," Renata said finally. So quietly she was almost not saying it to Dela, almost just saying it to herself, to the kitchen or the window or wherever she was standing. "Yeah," Dela said. "Tomas," Renata said. "Tomas," Dela said. She turned the page. Between 48 and 49, tucked in the gutter of the book where the binding held the pages together, was an envelope, sealed, her name written on the front in the same sure handwriting. She worked it open carefully, slowly, with one finger, the way you open something you suspect is going to change the shape of the hour you're living in. Inside was a letter, 2 pages, handwritten on heavy cream-colored stationery. She began to read it. She got through the first paragraph and stopped. She went back to the beginning and read it again, more slowly. It was a letter to the hospital, to the head of the cardiology department, where Tomas had been receiving treatment. It was written on Clint Eastwood's personal stationery, his name embossed at the top in simple letters. No decoration, just the name, just the fact of him. The letter described a charitable donation being made personally, not through any foundation or studio or public gesture, to a fund established specifically for pediatric cardiac patients whose families did not have sufficient financial means for full treatment. The letter was precise. It was quietly formal. It was the kind of letter written by someone who has made many arrangements in their lifetime and knows how to make them clearly and without fuss. The amount of the donation was not stated in the letter itself. Stapled to the back of the second page was a copy of a wire transfer receipt, a bank confirmation. Numbers on a page, official and complete, carrying the weight that only numbers on official pages can carry. Dela stared at the receipt. She blinked. She held it closer. She read the amount once. She set the paper down on her knee. She picked it up and read it again. It was more than the salary from this film. It was more than every calculation she had made and remade again on the hotel room floor in the dark. It was more than she had let herself imagine was possible. It was not a gesture. It was not a kindness. It was a solution. Complete and total and done. Already sent, already received weeks ago, while she had been standing on set every day not knowing, while she had been lying awake in the dark worrying, while she had been holding herself together with both hands and the thin wire of her own determination. He had already done it. The word arrived in her slowly, like warmth arriving in cold hands. Safe. Tomas was going to be safe. Once she sat in the trailer and she held the journal and the letter and the receipt and she cried. Not the way she cried in Ruth's scenes. Not the way she cried when she performed. The controlled, directed, purposeful crying that came from a specific real place but served a story that she could open and close like a door in a house she knew well. This was not that. This was the other kind. The kind that has been waiting behind every ordinary thing for weeks. The kind that does not ask permission. She cried the way she had needed to cry since the parking lot, since the folded paper, since the word treatable. Every night she had held it back. Every morning she had put on her costume and her brave face and walked onto a set and done the work and held it back again. It all came now at once in the trailer on day 44. Summer with a journal and a receipt on her lap, and her mother still on the phone saying nothing, because there was nothing to say that was the right size for this moment. She cried until she was empty. Then she was still. Genuinely still. The way you are still after something has passed through you completely and taken everything it came for. She washed her face at the trailer's small sink. Cold water. She pressed a towel against her eyes and held it there for a moment. She put her jacket on over her 1962 dress. She picked up the journal and held it flat against her chest. She walked out of the trailer into the last afternoon of the film. Outside, the crew was dismantling everything. Cases latching, cables coiling, screens going dark. The specific, irreversible sound of a world being carefully packed away. 44 days of work being folded into boxes and loaded into trucks. It always felt like this on the last day she had heard. This gentle, specific grief of a thing that was real and complete and now ending. Of a place that had held something extraordinary and was now being returned to plain air. Clint Eastwood was at the craft table. Of course he was. Coffee, book. The same as every single day, as though the last day of a film was exactly like any other, which she understood now was not indifference but philosophy. Every day equally worth being present for. No day more or less than another. She walked up to him. She did not say anything at first. She could not find a place to start that was the right place. So she did not start with words. She put the journal down on the table and she stepped forward and she put her arms around him. This man who was not her grandfather and was not a friend exactly and was not anything that had a word she knew, except that he had seen her when she most needed to be seen and had done something for her and her brother that no one had asked him to do, and that he had done without announcement, without any desire to be thanked for it, without leaving her any way to know until it was already complete and irreversible and simply true. He went still when she held him. Just for a moment, a brief, surprised stillness, like someone who has not been held in a while and has almost forgotten the weight of it. Then he put one hand on her back, gently, the way you place a hand on something you know is precious. "Go home to your brother," he said. His voice was very low, almost just breath. "I will," she said into his shoulder. "I promise I will." They stood like that for a moment. That was longer than a moment. The crew moved around them and past them and pretended not to see, which was the kindest thing the crew had done in 44 days of kindnesses. Then he said, and there was something in his voice that was almost light, almost the closest he got to playful. "Tell him the belt is 3 stars. But if he gets really good at it, if he really looks, the whole picture of Orion is there, the shoulders and the feet and all of it. You just have to look a little longer." She laughed. It came out undone and wet and completely real, and she did not try to make it anything other than what it was. "Okay," she said. "I'll tell him." She let go. She stepped back. She picked up the journal from the table and held it against her chest again. She looked at him, at his face, at his pale winter eyes, at the 93 years of being fully, deliberately alive that lived in every line of it. "Thank you," she said, "for the hand sanitizer, for the daughter with asthma, for the Orion's belt, for the journal, for the letter, for all of it, every piece, every quiet choice made on her behalf without her knowing." He looked at her. He nodded once. "Thank you," he said back, meaning for the work, for the truth she had put into it, for letting him be present for something that mattered, for being exactly who she was and not pretending to be anything else. She turned and walked toward the parking lot. At the edge of the set, she stopped and turned around. She didn't know why. Some instinct. Some need to carry one more image of this place with her. He was already reading his book. She smiled. The real one. She turned back around. In the parking lot, Renata's car was waiting with the engine running. The back seat had Tomas's booster seat in it, empty because Tomas was well enough now to be going home. Genuinely home, not to the hospital, home to Hollow Creek in his room, and the glow-in-the-dark stars on his ceiling, and the library books about constellations stacked on the floor. She got in. She closed the door. Renata looked at her, took in the red eyes, the journal pressed tight to her chest, the face of someone who has been emptied and filled in the same afternoon. "Ready?" Renata asked. Dela looked through the windshield at the outside of the soundstage, plain and gray and completely ordinary looking. No different from any warehouse. Nothing to tell a person driving past what had happened inside it. "Yeah," she said, "let's go home." The Weight of What Was opened in theaters 14 months after the last day of filming. The studio had been cautious in the weeks leading up to release. Not because they doubted the film. They did not doubt the film. They had seen the rough cut. Several people in the screening room had gone very quiet in the middle of it and had not become loud again. That was a good sign. That was, in fact, the best sign. But caution was in their nature. Caution was how studios survived. They released it quietly in limited theaters first to see what would happen. What happened was not quiet. The reviews arrived the way a tide arrives, slowly and then all at once, and then impossible to ignore. They were not the reviews anyone had expected. Not for a small, intimate, historical drama with a budget that the bigger studios would have called modest. The reviews were not about the production design, though the production design was beautiful. They were not primarily about the period detail or the score or the careful reconstruction of 1962. They were not even primarily about Clint Eastwood, which was the most surprising thing of all. They were about Dela Voss. One publication wrote that her performance was among the most honest things committed to film in the past 2 decades. Another called her a force of nature. 2 words that felt both exactly right and not quite large enough. A journalist in London, writing for a paper that did not usually cover American films with much warmth, set down his pen after watching and wrote simply that this girl carried truth in her face, that he had no technical language for what she did, that he could only tell the reader, "You believe her, completely, without reservation. Every single second she is on screen." The film expanded, then expanded again. People drove to theaters in towns that only had one screen to see it. People who did not usually go to films about 1962 went to see it and sat in the dark and came out changed in some quiet way they could not fully explain to the people waiting for them in the parking lot. Dela Voss was nominated for an Academy Award. She was 16 years old. She was the youngest actress nominated in her category in 31 years. When the nominations were announced on a Tuesday morning in January, Arlo Menz, who was still working in film, and who had never forgotten the message he had sent to the studio that nobody could define, read the list on his phone, and sat down on the floor of his apartment and stayed there for a while. On the night of the Academy Awards, Dela wore a green dress, simple, long, the color of the grass in Hollow Creek in early May. Under her heels, she wore one green sock and one orange sock, the same combination she had worn under her costume boots on the first day of filming, because she had decided, when she was getting dressed, that she was not going to be a different person on the outside than she was on the inside. Not tonight, not ever. Nobody noticed the socks when she walked the red carpet. They were hidden under the hem of her dress. Then a photographer caught her stepping out of the car. One brief moment of movement. With the dress shifting, both socks visible for a half second, and took the picture. And the picture moved across the internet with the particular speed that only true things move. Within a day, it had become something people talked about in the way people talk about things that strike them as important, without being able to say exactly why. The mismatched socks. The girl who wore them to the biggest night of her industry without apology or announcement. Just because they were hers. She did not win the award. The winner was announced and Dela stood in the audience and applauded genuinely, completely with both hands. She held Renata's hand on her left. On her right was an empty seat. The seat that would have been Tomas's, except that Tomas was 12 years old and it was a school night. Suona and Renata had made the firm and non-negotiable decision that some things were still school nights, even when your sister was nominated for an Academy Award. Tomas had argued this point with considerable passion, and then accepted it with grace because he was Tomas, and getting over things was one of his great gifts. Afterward, in the press room, under lights that made everyone look like they were being gently interrogated, a journalist asked Dela whether she was disappointed. She took a moment. She thought about a parking lot, about a piece of paper folded in half on a center console, about a cold stone below her left collarbone that had, somewhere in the last 14 months, quietly and without ceremony begun to feel less like a stone and more like a compass. Something that had always been pointing somewhere. He asked that she was only now learning to read. "No," she said, "not really." "Why not?" the journalist pressed. "Because the thing I needed most this year already happened," she said. "The film was part of it, but only part." The journalist wrote it down. It ran in the piece. Most people who read it found it gracious but slightly puzzling. The kind of thing a young person says when they are trying to sound wise and are not quite there yet. They moved on to the next paragraph. But Clint Eastwood, sitting in a chair by the window of his home in Carmel on a Tuesday morning, with the magazine open on his knee, and the Pacific Ocean doing what it always did outside the glass, moving, always moving, forward without stopping. Read that line and understood it completely, down to the very last word. He closed the magazine. He set it on the table beside him. He picked up his coffee. He looked out at the ocean. And he was quiet for a long time in the particular way of a person who has done something they are glad they did and who does not need anyone to know they did it. Here is the thing nobody knew. Here is the thing that appeared in none of the reviews, none of the profiles, none of the interviews that ran in magazines, with Dela's face on the cover and her name in large letters above the image. It was not in the awards coverage or the viral photo of the mismatched socks, or the long, thoughtful pieces about what her performance meant for young actresses and for cinema, and for the particular kind of truth that only certain performers are able to carry onto a screen. Here is the thing that only 3 people in the entire world knew on the night of the Academy Awards. Dela, Renata, and one other person, sitting by a window in Carmel, California, looking at the Pacific Ocean with a cup of coffee going cold on the table beside him. 6 weeks before filming began on The Weight of What Was, Clint Eastwood had received the script. The producers had been nervous sending it. He had been careful about his projects for years, choosing slowly and rarely, and this was not the sort of large, loud film that traditionally sought his name. It was small, interior, a film about listening and truth, and the specific courage required to say what you saw when everyone around you is saying you saw nothing. It was not obvious, it was not guaranteed. He had read it in one sitting, overnight. Finished it in the early morning hours and set it down on his desk and sat with it quietly for a while. Then he had called his people. But before he said yes or no, before he gave them anything at all, he asked a single question. One question only. His people found it unusual. The producers, when it was relayed to them, also found it unusual. It was not the question anyone asked before committing to a film. It was not about the director or the budget or the shooting schedule or any of the things that questions before committing to a film are usually about. He asked, "Tell me about the girl, the one playing Ruth. Tell me who she is." And they told him. They told him about Hollow Creek, about the school gymnasium and Mrs. Olin and the 200 parents who had forgotten to check their phones. About the online videos in Celeste Park and the 3 words that had changed everything. The public story, the story that anyone paying attention could have found. And then one of his people, a careful, thorough person who believed that knowing more was always better than knowing less. told him the rest. The part that was not public, the part that Dela had shared with no one on the film set for 14 days. Tomas, the hospital, the rare condition. The word treatable held like a rope, the money that was not there, and the film's salary that would begin to make it there. And the reason, the only reason, Dela Voss had signed the contract and gotten on the plane and was standing in Albuquerque, New Mexico, holding a paper cup in both hands and reading her script like it might run away if she stopped. Clint Eastwood listened to all of it. He was quiet for a moment that his people had learned, over many years, not to fill. Then he said, "Yes, I'll do the film." They had assumed the script was the reason. The story, the character, the quality of the writing. They were right. He did love the script, genuinely and completely. But the script was not the only reason. The script was not even the first reason. He had gone into that film already knowing, already decided. Before day one, before the craft table, before the hand sanitizer slid quietly across the table without a word, before any of it, the wire transfer had already been arranged. The donation to the hospital fund had already been made. It was sitting in a holding account already in motion 3 days before filming began. When the journal had already been filled with the story on pages 47 and 48, the letter to the cardiology department had already been written on his personal stationery and sealed in the envelope between the pages. He had arranged everything before he ever set foot on that set, before he ever extended his hand. And the hand, that is the thing, that is the piece that the crew saw and completely misread, that the whole world misread when the story got out afterward in its incomplete form. The hand extended on day one was not a test. It was not a formality. It was not the great Clint Eastwood expecting the deference that greatness believes it is owed. It was the opposite of that. He had extended his hand because he had been watching her from the moment he walked onto the set. He had seen, etched with his pale winter eyes that had been reading people for 93 years, exactly what she was carrying. The cup held in both hands, the smile given to everyone, the hands that went to pockets between the smiling, the way she greeted every person warmly and touched no one. He had seen the whole of it in the first 3 minutes, and he had understood immediately. The way he always understood immediately, because understanding people was the only craft he had ever practiced longer than filmmaking. He had extended his hand because that was the only language available to him in that moment to say, "I see you. I know you are here. I know what you are carrying. You are not invisible, and you are not alone." When she stepped back, he understood that too. Of course she stepped back. She was protecting her brother from 400 miles away with every tool available to her, including the refusal of a handshake from the most famous actor alive. Of course she did. He had loved her for it before she had even fully completed the motion. The smile that the crew had never seen on his face before, the one that nobody could name, that was not the famous squint or the movie expression or any of the things people imitated at parties. That smile was recognition, pure and complete. The smile of a person who has encountered someone doing something extraordinarily difficult in an extraordinarily quiet way and who sees it fully and is moved by it. He had planned the journal. He had planned the letter. He had arranged the donation because at 93 years old, he had more resources than he would ever spend, and because he had spent his entire life trying to do things that were worth doing, and there was nothing, not one single thing, more worth doing with whatever time and resources remained to him than making sure a 12-year-old boy with a sick heart got to keep living and whistling through the gap in his teeth and covering his ceiling with the right constellations, checked 3 times against a library book. He had planned all of it, everything except day 21, that he had not planned. That had happened the way the truest things always happen, without plan, without rehearsal, without effort. Because when there is no distance between what is real and what is being performed, there is nothing to plan. You simply tell the truth. He had leaned across that table and looked at Dela Voss and said, "It is going to be okay," because in that moment, knowing everything he knew and having already done everything he had done, it was not a reassurance. It was not a line. It was simply and plainly and completely the truth. And saying the truth had always been the only thing he knew how to do when everything else fell away. It was going to be okay. He had made absolutely certain of it. This is the thing that Dela only fully understood when she sat on the couch in her trailer on the last day of filming with a navy blue journal on her lap and an envelope between its pages. When she understood not just what he had done, but when, before the film, before day one, before she had ever walked onto that set and picked up her paper cup and stood there trying to be brave. He had already decided. He had already decided she was worth it. Not because of what she would do on screen, not for the reviews or the nomination or the photo of the mismatched socks that a million people would share without knowing the story behind them. Not for any of what came after, because none of what came after had happened yet, and he had made his decision before all of it. He decided because of who she already was, because of a girl from a town the world forgot about, in mismatched socks under costume boots, holding a paper cup in both hands, who had decided without telling anyone, without needing anyone to know, that she would hold the whole world together for the sake of one small boy with a gap between his teeth and stars on his ceiling. That was who he had decided was worth it. That was always who. Tomas Voss is 14 years old now. His heart is strong. It has been strong for over a year. The doctors use words like stable and progressing and normal, and each of those words is a gift that Renata unwraps quietly every time she hears them. The way you unwrap something you know is precious and want to make last. He has a telescope now, a proper one on a proper stand set up in the backyard of their new house. The one that is warm in winter, the one with enough rooms that nobody has to share, the one with a yard wide enough that on a clear night you can stand in the middle of it and see the sky from edge to edge without anything getting in the way. Last Tuesday evening, as the sun went down and the first stars opened up above Hollow Creek, Tomas Voss walked into the backyard in his socks and looked up. He found Orion's belt in 40 seconds. 3 stars in a row, clean and certain and exactly where they always are. Then he looked longer, past the belt, past the easy part, and found the shoulders and the feet and the whole enormous figure spread across the dark, holding its ground the way it always has, the way it will long after all of us are done looking up at it. He took out his phone. He typed a message to his sister. 3 words because 3 words were enough. Because some things do not need more than 3 words to be completely true. Found him again. Dela was sitting in a makeup chair on a different film set in a different city, a different role, a different story. Her second major film, her face being prepared by a different makeup artist in a different early morning. When the message arrived, she read it under the vanity lights, the bright white lights that show everything. She read his 3 words and she sat with them for a moment, and she felt the place below her left collarbone, where the cold stone had lived her whole life, where it had shifted and made room, and slowly changed its nature over the past year. She felt it warm, not gone. It would never be entirely gone. The door still clicks sometimes in quiet rooms. Marcus Voss still existed somewhere in the world, and his leaving still lived inside his daughter, the way all real things live, permanently without asking permission. But warmer now, pointed somewhere, less like a wound and more like a compass. Just as she had said in the press room under the lights. She smiled, the real one. The one that starts so deep in the eyes that by the time it reaches the mouth, it has already been true for several seconds. She put her phone in the pocket of the robe she wore between scenes. She stood up from the makeup chair. She walked out to do her work. And that is the full story of Dela Voss, Tomas, and a man who chose kindness so quietly that nobody knew about it until it was already done. If this story moved you even a little, if it reminded you that real greatness is not about the awards on the wall or the name on the poster, but about what a person does when nobody's watching, then this video did exactly what it was supposed to do. Before you go, drop a comment right now and tell us, where in the world are you watching this from? We have people joining us from all over, and every single location in that comment section is a reminder that kindness speaks a language everybody understands, no matter where you are from. If this story deserves to reach more people, and we believe it does, hit that like button right now. It takes 1 second, and it tells the world that stories like this one matter, that Dela's story matters, that Tomas's story matters, that the quiet, unseen, unannounced choices people make for the ones they love deserve to be heard. And if you are not subscribed yet, subscribe right now and join this community, because this is what we do here. We find the stories that got buried under the noise, the ones about real courage and real love and real human beings doing extraordinary things in ordinary moments. We tell those stories, and we tell them every single week, because the world needs more of this and less of everything else. One like, one subscribe, one share. That is how kindness spreads. Now click on the video appearing on your screen right now, because trust us, you are going to want to see what we found next.